Long before fire, before tools, before language, there was only instinct and hunger. 4.8 million years ago, Earth was a different planet. Forests stretched endlessly, volcanoes breathed fire, thunder rumbled like gods speaking in the sky, and walking upright for the first time was a strange little creature. They were not yet human, but no longer just apes. This was Australopithecus, small, hairy, clever, curious, and hungry. They didn't have fire, they didn't have weapons, they didn't even speak. All they had was survival, and survival meant eating, whatever they could find. Their diet was wild, raw, and brutal. They foraged for leaves, berries, tree bark, roots, and seeds. Sometimes they found nuts, sometimes wild figs. And when lucky, a cracked bird egg or a dead animal's leftovers, still warm from the kill of a predator. They were scavengers, eating after lions, leopards, vultures. The first meat they tasted was not hunted. It was found, rotten, risky, but rich in energy, and it changed everything. At first it was fear. The smell of blood meant danger. But then, it meant strength. Their bodies craved it, their brains needed it. And over time, meat became more than food. It became fuel for evolution. You see, protein feeds the brain. As they consumed richer food, their bodies adapted. Stronger jaws, sharper teeth, better memory, longer endurance, and, slowly, bigger brains. But even then, eating wasn't easy. Every meal was a battle. Poisonous berries could kill. Climbing for fruit meant falling. Stealing meat meant facing predators. To eat was to risk everything, but not eating meant death. That's why they moved constantly, day after day, mile after mile, following the rains, following the herds, following survival. And everywhere they went, they left signs of their hunger. Broken nutshells, scraped bones, chewed fruit, the earliest trash of a species that didn't yet know it would one day rule the earth. But in those early days, it was only about one thing. What can I eat today to stay alive tomorrow? And so our story begins in Africa, where the very first humans evolved, where the oldest fossils have been found. Here, at this very spot, life began. A single cell turning into trillions, becoming fish, then amphibians, reptiles, then mammals. And right here, the great apes split off. Chimpanzees, gorillas, bonobos, and our extinct cousins, the Australopithecines. They shared 98% of our DNA. They walked upright like us. They used rudimentary tools, maybe even made fire. But after 10 million years, something remarkable happened. Their brain power grew, their bodies shrank, and they disappeared. But we didn't. We survived. And we evolved into the species that would conquer the world. Homo sapiens. 300,000 years ago, we spread across the planet. We built shelters. We wove clothes. We created art. We developed language, love, religion, war, and most important of all, agriculture. We learned to farm, to plant, to grow. And with that, we settled down. For the first time in history, humans stayed put. But how did this change our relationship with food? Well, here's what you need to know. We started by hunting and gathering. That's what our ancestors did. They searched for food day by day. But farming changed everything. Now we could grow food. In one village, people grew corn, wheat, rice, barley. In another, yams, cassava, millet, sorghum. In another, bananas, plantains, coconuts. And soon, some foods traveled across the world. Mangoes from India to Peru, tomatoes from South America to Italy, sugarcane from New Guinea to Africa. Foods that once grew in one place could now grow almost anywhere. The world became smaller, our plates became richer. Yet not everyone had access to these new foods. Some were too expensive, others too rare, some were considered dangerous, even poisonous. That's why we associate certain foods with certain regions. Sushi in Japan, pasta in Italy, kimchi and Korea, paella and Spain. Each dish tells a story of survival and adaptation. How ingredients were transformed from simple food into cultural treasure. It took centuries, sometimes millennia. But throughout history, people kept experimenting. With every generation, new flavors emerged. Spices, sauces, stews, pastries. Unique recipes created by unique people. Then came the exchange of goods between nations. Silk and spices from Asia, gold and grain from Europe, slaves and sugar from Africa. And with each new ingredient, our plates became more colorful. We adopted, adapted, and invented. That's how food reflects our history. Our choices depend on where we live, how much we have, how much we can afford. But most importantly, who we are, what we believe in, and who we love. Today, we face new challenges: hunger and waste, climate change and cruelty. It's up to us to decide how to fix them. Whether we choose convenience or compassion, profit or people, tradition or the planet, it's up to us to write the next chapter in our story. Will we be remembered for our hunger or for how we ended it? That is all for this episode. See you next time. Welcome to my channel. There comes a moment in every species when fear turns into action, when prey decides to fight back. That moment was the birth of the hunt. Thousands of years passed, and still, the early hominins wandered barefoot, half-starved, chasing the smell of something edible. They watched lions feast. They watched hyenas tear flesh. They waited for leftovers. But one day something changed. They didn't wait. They attacked. Not with claws or fangs, but with sticks, stones, strategy. A small group surrounded a wounded gazelle. They shouted, waved, threw rocks. Confused and limping, the animal fell. And just like that, for the first time in Earth's long history, a weak, weaponless creature had brought down prey, not with strength, but with mind. That first kill was messy. They didn't know how to cut meat. They didn't know how to store it. But they knew this. They had done something impossible. For the first time, meat didn't come from luck or trickery, but from choice. And choice changed everything. Meat meant energy. Energy meant movement. Movement meant exploration. They began to plan. They learned patterns, where animals gathered, how they moved, when they slept. They tracked, they stalked, they hunted, and they began to get better. Sharper stones, heavier sticks, coordinated attacks. They began to share the kill, not just eat alone, and that changed something even deeper: community. Now there were roles: hunters, watchers, caregivers, firekeepers once they discovered it, and each role mattered, each person mattered. The hunt didn't just bring food. It brought language, trust, loyalty. It brought tribe. They gathered around the dead animal. One cut, one chewed, one guarded the meat, and in that act, something sacred was born: the dinner circle. Not just a place to eat, but a place to share stories, warnings, dreams. From the first kill came the first camp, and from that camp came the first human bonds. They hunted together. They ate together. They watched over their kill, keeping it safe from scavengers, learning which parts were best to eat first, how to cut through the toughest hides, how to preserve the rest. No longer did they need to wander, following the whims of hunger and the dictates of a full moon. Now they could stay in one place, build something bigger than shelter, something like home. The oldest, strongest, and bravest of the hunters would go out at dawn, following the tracks of a herd of deer or a troop of wild pigs. The women and children would tend the fire, preparing tools and weapons, keeping watch over the younger kids, and collecting what little greenery they could find to supplement their diet. When the sun dipped below the horizon, they would gather around the fire, sharing stories and teaching the young ones the ways of the tribe, the laws and customs that held them together, the skills that kept them alive. Sometimes, if the hunt had been good, there would be plenty of meat left over after the first night's feast, so they would take some of it, carefully scraping away the excess fat and sinew, and they would bury it under the ground, hidden away from scavengers, to be dug up and enjoyed another day. This wasn't just food. It was community. It was life. It was survival. It was everything they needed to keep going. With the ability to hunt came not only sustenance, but also the means to grow, to thrive, and to build a society. The cycle of hunt, cook, eat, rest, repeat became the rhythm of their lives. It wasn't easy. There were bad hunts, there were famines, there were battles with rival tribes, but they endured, they adapted, they evolved. They learned to use bows and arrows, to domesticate animals, to cultivate the land. They invented plows and axes, traps and fishing nets. They built villages and cities. They created civilizations. All because a long time ago, a small group of barefoot, weaponless ancestors decided not to wait for the lions to finish their meal. They decided to take matters into their own hands and claim their own piece of the kill. And in doing so, they sparked a revolution that changed the course of history. The sun dipped below the horizon, leaving the sky painted in hues of orange and purple. A chill wind rustled through the tall grasses, signaling the start of a new day, or rather the start of a long, dark night. For our ancestors, that first night by the fire, it was scary. The darkness was full of danger. There were predators out there in the black, and there was nothing more terrifying than not being able to see them coming. But as the generations passed, that fear turned to fascination. They didn't just survive the night, they lit it. Fire changed everything. No longer did the dark mean danger. Now it meant stories, connection, reflection. They cooked meat. They warmed their children. They healed their wounded. But most importantly, they remembered. Each flame was a memory of a successful hunt, maybe the mammoth from that day, or of a close call with a saber-tooth, or the day little Grug learned to walk. The flickering light danced in their eyes, making the lines on their faces seem like they were glowing. And as the flames died down and the embers glowed, they told stories of those memories, stories of hunts and near misses and lessons learned. This wasn't a campfire. It was a story fire. This wasn't a tool for cooking or warmth or light. It was a connection to the past. It made them who they were. Somewhere deep in a cave, a child's handprint still glows in ochre, red, whispering across thousands of years, "I was here." That little handprint is proof of our ancestors' transformation from frightened campers to confident storytellers. It shows how they turned the most terrifying part of the day into the best. How they took something that could be used to cower around and create a way to remember, to reflect, and to reconnect. And we still do it today. We tell stories around the fire. Maybe yours doesn't crackle with the same magic as mine, but it's the same instinct. You and I both have the urge to make sense of the world around us, to piece together where we came from so we can understand where we're going. A few thousand years later, humans would leave Africa and populate the world. We'd build great cities and empires. We'd invent farming and the wheel, but we also brought the story fire with us. Around every hearth, every bonfire, every campfire, people would gather. We'd cook our food and share our hopes and dreams. There were other fires, too. The funeral pyres for our dead, huge bonfires to celebrate victories, even sacred fires tended by priests. Some would say stories helped us survive. Without them, we wouldn't have been able to conquer new lands or endure hard winters, or even know how to act when the saber-tooth came. Our stories were encoded with information, warnings, and advice passed down in whispers by the firelight. Stories helped us find our way through the darkness, and sometimes they were the darkness. When the tribe gathered around the storyteller, everyone would hush. Even the bravest warriors would sit cross-legged, raptly listening as tales of monsters and heroes filled the night air. And when the morning came, we'd face the sun with new strength, because we'd face the darkness with stories. We're the storytellers now, aren't we? We tell stories about the past to learn how to live in the present. We imagine the future by spinning tales about it. And the stories we tell shape who we are, don't they? Fairy tales made us believe in magic. Horror stories made us brave. Folk tales taught us what's important. and myths showed us what's possible. I think it's time we had another story, a new tale to teach us about the world and our place in it. Let's bring back the magic. Join me by the story fire and listen closely. You might hear a whisper that's been waiting thousands of years to be heard. They became more than bodies. They became storytellers. And slowly, story by story, hunt by hunt, spark by spark, they were becoming something new. Not just hominids, not just survivors, but something we would one day call human. Hi, I'm the host. This is a story about them, about us. It's about where we came from and how we got here. It's the story of humanity. For years, we've been fascinated by the idea of what makes us us. What separates us from the animals? Is it language? Is it art? Is it our ability to love or our capacity for violence? As we move through the seasons of life, we encounter characters who embody these questions. Characters like John, who we meet in the very first episode. He teaches us about storytelling. He shows us that we are more than just bodies. We are storytellers. Throughout the series, we hear stories of love, loss, survival, and hope. We watch as these characters grow and change, and we begin to understand what it means to be human. This is a story you won't want to miss. So grab your popcorn, settle in, and get ready to find out what it means to be human. I've always wondered what it must have been like back in the beginning, back when humans were just starting out. I mean, we all learn about it in school, right? We learn about the caveman and the dinosaurs and the whole blah, blah, blah. But what was that really like? I mean, what was life actually like back then? It was probably pretty scary, right? I mean, think about it. No roads, no hospitals, no air conditioning. And everything's trying to kill you. Like if you cut yourself shaving, you're probably gonna die. If you get a paper cut, you're screwed. Back then, even breathing was a risk because the air was full of diseases and stuff. You couldn't even trust water. It was full of bacteria. Yet somehow, some way, humans not only survived, but they thrived. In fact, I would say that being a human back then was kind of awesome because you got to see things that we can't even imagine today. Humans saw the first sunrise and the first snowflake. They heard the first songbird and the first heartbeat. They smelled the first flower and the first rain. They experienced the world for the first time. And in many ways, we lost that sense of wonder. Sure, kids still ask why all the time. But as we get older, most of us stop wondering and we stop asking. We just kind of assume that this is how things are, and that there must be a reason for it, right? But back then, humans didn't know why. There was no reason. They just looked up at the stars and wondered. So here's one way that humans went from scared and confused to thriving and curious. Thousands of years had passed. From scattered fires in caves to shared meals under open skies, human beings had become something new. Not just hunters and survivors, but storytellers and builders and believers. They began to look up, at stars, at storms, at silence. And somewhere deep inside them, a new fire began to burn, the fire of questions. Who are we? Where did we come from? What happens after death? These questions gave birth to something powerful, faith. Humans told stories of gods in the sky, of spirits in trees, of ancestors watching from the winds. They danced and sang and prayed, not just for rain, but for meaning. They needed something bigger than themselves to believe in, because even though humans had learned to survive, that wasn't enough. Life was still scary, unpredictable, lonely, and painful. But their stories gave them strength. They made sense of the darkness, tamed the wildness inside and outside of them. Their myths became their moments of truth, shaping the way they lived, loved, and lost. Then came the gift of time. They studied the moon, the seasons, the sun's shadow on the ground, and they began to measure moments. At first, it was just counting stars. Then they carved calendars. Humans bent the infinite into rhythm. They gave shape to eternity. And with time, they found order. Tribes became towns, towns became cities, villages around rivers grew into civilizations, walls rose, temples reached for the heavens, and markets filled with spices, tools, ideas, languages. What once was wild became woven, woven into a world we now call history. In just a few moments, we went from scattered fires to shared meals to skyscrapers and smartphones. And all because humans learned to wonder. Because in the beginning, there was nothing but the fire of questions. And then humans asked those questions and everything changed. So, yeah, I don't know about you, but I feel pretty lucky to be alive right now. I mean, I get to witness all these amazing technological advancements. I get to watch movies on my phone while eating food from an app. I mean, life is good. But I bet life for our ancestors was pretty awesome too. I mean, they got to experience everything for the first time. They got to watch the very first snowfall. They got to see the first sunrise. They got to wonder. And maybe that's the real secret to happiness. Not what you have or where you are or what you do, but simply this: the courage to wonder, the willingness to ask questions, and the desire to explore. That's what makes life worth living. That's what makes life beautiful. So next time you find yourself stuck in traffic or waiting in line or dealing with some other annoyance, just remember, could be worse. At least you're not watching the first sunset ever. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like and subscribe. It really helps us out. Thank you so much for watching.